So, lemon smuggler extraordinaire, Memo Gidley. If you could describe this dinner in one word, what would it be?
Silly.
That's fair.
Perfect.
No, I'm serious. Silly. You want me to say it different?
No, you're gonna fight. Are you gonna? He's gonna fight us on this.
I think it just blew out their microphone. But
And now for Dinner with Racers, presented by
Continental Tire.
with your hosts, Ryan Eversley and Sean Heckman.
Placeholder radio sound. I'm a driver. I'm very angry. This is the sound of a driver on the radio during a race.
What do you think I should order?
Welcome to Dinner with Racers. I'm Ryan Eversley alongside my co-host, Sean Heckman.
Hello. So, we are somewhere in northern Florida headed home. I'm seeing exit 11 on the road signs as we pass through. What interstate is this?
75.
On 75.
Yeah.
So, we are wrapping up a 30-day journey that took us 8,000 miles over 30 days across 20 states.
That's right.
And what car took us there?
The Acura MDX.
And on what tires, perchance?
Maybe Continental tires?
Oh.
Weird.
But in this whole journey, we had 27 meals with 27 noteworthy people within the sport. Racing drivers, team owners, series people, you name it, they all had something to say. So during our Northern California swing, we went out to a little city known as Sausalito, which is just north of San Francisco, to meet up with some guy named Memo Gidley.
Probably my favorite interview because we didn't know we were getting when we got there. We hadn't seen him since his accident that he had last year.
Exactly.
And when he opened the door standing up, we were both relieved, and he was so open about everything, it just made the trip totally worth it.
Exactly. So for those who don't know who Memo is kind of one of those classic American success stories, especially in the world of racing. Mexican-American. You'll learn about why that is. But Memo didn't grow up with a ton of resources, grew up in a boating community. We get into that. But he made it all the way to Champ Car and IndyCar as somebody without a lot of means. 7 years, and really had to work his way through the whole process. So a lot of humility, a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of talent. We cover all those things. And then, of course, most recently had a huge accident in 2014 at the Rolex 24 at Daytona. Still on the path to recovery, and God bless him, he goes into this in extensive detail with us. We really learn a lot about his recovery, the process he's going through, the whole thing. And his upbringing is unlike anyone that I think we've ever met.
I was really honestly blown away by his sense of humor about a situation and his drive to get back in the seat, which is definitely going to happen. So honestly, might be my favorite episode that we did, only because of the things he's had to go through recently.
So beyond his recovery, some other things you'll learn about: Bugle Tom.
Yep.
You'll learn about his parents being smugglers.
Which is hilarious.
And all over a delicious dinner from Soul Food, which he had delivered, actually.
He had it delivered. I had barbecue spare ribs, some black beans, white rice, potato pancakes. Potato pancakes. And then you had a chicken sandwich?
Yeah.
Weird.
So let's hear from Memo. All thanks
to Continental Tire.
All right, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2.
We waste no time. There's no intros. We just go.
sounds good. All right. Nice to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
But before we got going, the first thing that struck me as we walked in is you're describing some of the stuff you're going through. Are you like a medical expert now? Because I don't think I've ever heard you speak that clinically before on
right.
anything.
Yeah,
So-
you definitely learn. I mean, it's I was always just sort of kept to the basics with just about everything except for racing stuff. But you definitely learn because when you're dealing with something that you want to make better so badly because it hurts so much that you're reaching out and you're definitely trying to learn as much as possible.
Right. And I assume, as they're going through stuff and explaining surgeries, that it's probably the first time you've heard of half of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, it's more, definitely the first time I've heard of it because I've really never, had one compression fracture, but I was back in the race car 2 months later, and that was after a Long Beach incident, decade ago. And but I never really thought to think about it because it healed so quickly.
Yeah.
But when you have the ongoing like recovery and multiple things, and it definitely gets you thinking. But still, I'm not an expert on it. I just more on like the recovery. It's like what has worked for me and where it hasn't worked. Like a friend of mine was just involved in a big accident that did a fracture on his back, also compression fracture, and so I'm offered to, hey, any advice you need, just give me a call.
Right. So I mean, let's waste no time. I mean, where are you right now as far as everything?
It's pretty good. I mean, there's basically, when you factor in everything that was wrong, I mean, there's something like 14 bones that were broken and back, So, just in like my left leg right here, there was, the heel. I have a cadaver heel. I have fractures down in the lower area of foot bones. I've got 4 breaks in the tibia and fibia. I've got a titanium rod. So that's just one leg from the knee down,
exactly.
So there's multiple things. So considering all that, it's all good. And basically I'm just left with 2 things. One, I need to still get the fracture solid. And the other thing is I just have this annoying nerve pain that's, light years better than it was before, because it was just horrendous before, and now it's just like an annoying toothache. But still, having a toothache all the time, sometimes you gotta deal with that,
Right. Well, specifically, we're at your place right now just because you've got a couch that you can sit at, the right position. You can't just call a restaurant because you don't know what the chairs are going to be like.
Kind of, yeah. It's not as comfortable. It's a hit or miss, we go out to dinner and go to movies and things like that, but it's a little bit hit or miss, and sometimes I just have to get up and walk around, which is not relief, but it's more relief than sitting in a chair that's not comfortable.
Sure.
So.
Can you pretty much look at it? It's where you're going to sit and go, okay, that chair's going to work, that chair's not going to work, or do you have to figure it out?
Kind of, except it's, it has to do with nerve pain, and nerve pain is just so confusing, where it comes from and what it is. So it's more just like a position. But yeah, usually if I have enough soft things, like if there's a beanbag in a chair, then I'm good, because I can position it however I want. But if it's square, vertical, hard, no adjustment, then I'm not into it at all. So.
Well, but it gives you an excuse then to have some bitchin' beanbags.
I honestly,
I'm just saying, I would love to be.
Okay, you want to do story number 1?
Yes.
So on my boat, I have 4 beanbags, and in my box fan, I have 3 beanbags. So
awesome.
I never had any beanbags a year and a half ago, so now I have multiple beanbags. Let's put it that way.
Nice. And who's going to argue with you? Is
right.
the best part.
Yeah, I want them.
Oh, they love them too. That's the thing. They're like, I love these beanbags. I go, yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now you can go to your fiance and be like, yeah, the other thing would help would be like a pool table.
Yeah,
a foosball.
jacuzzi would go really nice right here in the living room.
Oh yeah, need that jacuzzi. Yes, a lot of things.
Nice. Do most people that you sort of see or hang out with, does everybody kind of know the deal as far as you being able to sit at certain restaurants or whatever?
Not really. It's sort of like one thing you learn. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have dealt with this, but when you're going through something yourself, it's hard, even though you relate it to somebody else, it's hard for them to understand, and then they just forget sort of right away, just like I used to do the same thing. It's like we all have lives and things going on, so it's not like, unless it's someone close and personal, like a family, that you see all the time, people just forget. They know you're dealing with stuff that they just sort of forget.
Sure. And do you still keep in touch with everybody in racing?
Yeah, I'm not like a social butterfly, so to speak. I'm social when I'm around people that I like, but it's like as far as texting people or emailing or Facebooking or it's like, so I keep a lot of local people, because I see people at the Sonoma Raceway all the time, at the go-kart track or the car track, or all the car guys locally. Yeah, I see them, but I haven't been to pro races for a long time, so I haven't seen or talk to a lot of those people unless they've reached out to me.
Right. So you were saying you're still getting out to the track and you're still coaching right now, at least locally.
Yeah, it's part of the progression, but it's where I started. No, I could never, I couldn't even drive my street car. I couldn't get off the bed or whatever. But now I do coaching. Which I enjoy. It gets me out to the track. It also helps to pay the bills, you know?
Yeah.
So,
well, I hear you. So, we'll be blunt. We were driving through here going, how the f*** does he afford this? Because,
and then that was before we saw the view.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the view is awesome.
So it's what is it, 9 o'clock at night? It's 8 o'clock at night, and we're looking over a balcony here in Sausalito. And, you've got the best San Francisco skyline you can ask for, and the Bay Bridge, literally just right out your deck here. So.
Yeah, well, you heard of Sugar Daddy. Well, there's also Sugar Mama. No.
Yes.
Nice.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to need some advice.
Okay, so how does that work?
Yeah, where do I meet that? For anyone that's listening that doesn't know where Sausalito is, because I had no clue, it's like the first right you can take when you cross the Golden Gate Bridge heading out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of sitting on the side of a mountain,
Yeah.
as I would see it. So if I were to jump off your balcony, which I can't really see, like how far down is it? Just right there. Is it?
Oh, it's not far. It's a gradual. Well, I didn't. Let's try it.
Let's
I think
throw
it's
something
like
off?
it's like 2 or 3 feet, so you can do it. No
Let
problem.
me go first. Yeah.
Eversley, it's another year now.
So
it's a great spot. I mean, it's just having the bay. It looks like a swimming pool out there in the day. You guys are here at night, but it's, it's where I was raised. It's the water is the other thing that I have a passion for. But it's like seeing tanker ships or container ships going in and out and sailboats and people enjoying it and just the view. It's pretty awesome.
I love that stuff. Like, especially when you come to a city like San Francisco. We drove up to Buttonwillow, down to Buttonwillow from the last time we were here. And so we went some crazy way, but we ended up going past one of the main inlets for all the shipping contains. And I couldn't believe that. I mean, there was like 30 of them in a row. I'm from Atlanta. We don't have a lot of shipping that gets floated through there. You have to go down to Savannah to see that stuff. So, just this whole area with not only, like, right now we're looking at the skyline. You can see it's beautiful. I don't know what bridge that is.
That's the Bay Bridge.
Well, the Golden Gate, you can see the tops right here in the daytime, and then this is the Bay Bridge right here.
And then behind that we have aircraft coming in from SFO.
SFO traffic.
Yeah, so it's just an amazing view.
Yeah.
It's nice. I mean, this is sort of definitely fiance influence, originally girlfriend influence, now fiance, but I lived
if
a little bit.
If she's paying for you to be here, that's a key
well,
no matter what.
Actually, I shouldn't be saying that too much.
keep.
I pay a little bit. But, I was actually living up north a little bit, about 15 miles, and she was living in San Francisco, and so this was sort of like the medium, point.
Boy,
so
how crappy compliment.
I love Sausalito.
How long have you guys been here?
Oh, we've been here like 4 years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but the thing in Sausalito is I have a lot of history here in my family too, on the waterfront, but because I was raised on the waterfront. Like, I mean, literally the people that live anchored out, which is where we lived, majority of them are sort of borderline homeless.
Sure.
A lot of them are definitely crazy. But it's a great family. But anyway,
that was your family.
Yeah, let's get into that. There's got to be some pretty cool stories about that.
Because rumor, I mean, legend has it that you were a boat guy growing up, right?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Like literally slept on boats.
Yeah, like that's what you knew. And I mean, the legend goes that like when you would get to hotel rooms, you didn't sleep on beds, because you just didn't know how to.
I didn't know how to. Yeah, no. Actually, well, thing is, in boats is you have the berths are very narrow.
Right.
And also on the sailboats we had, if you sat up abruptly on the boat, then you knocked your head on the I'm going to
take a bold assumption. We're not talking like 3-story yachts, right?
People think that though.
There's no helicopter.
No helicopters. Yeah. Yeah. But so anyway, those narrow, berths that you sleep on, it sort of keeps you confined, And so then when I got into a bed, when, at some point it was like I'm rolling around and tossing and turning. So I actually had then decided or got a lazy boy chair, because it was narrow, and I slept in that for like 2 or 3 years.
Nice.
So, because I needed something to be stationary, not move. So.
Right. I guess.
That's true awesome. Story. Yeah, it's true story.
So but it was like a water-based family. Your dad was in the boating industry?
Well, actually, because he was born in 1913, so easily old enough to be my grandfather, and then some. He'd be 105 if he was alive today.
Wow. Right.
And so he came down here just after the Great Depression, just after the flu epidemic. They came down. He was living down here during the Depression, because one of his parents passed away, and so they moved down here.
I mean, he's literally here, just barely after the 2006 earthquake, basically.
Oh, yeah,
so it's still recovering.
Well, he was born in 1913, yeah. And so his stepdad then at the time was working for the dynamite company over in Hercules, which is across the – I mean, they produced dynamite.
Acme Dynamite.
Yeah.
Company, yeah.
I mean, where you
Right, you get it at the dynamite store.
Yeah. And, this was – right, exactly. You get the dynamite store. Go into the dynamite store.
There's this coyote. He was a huge fan. So.
Right, exactly.
The whole winter.
That's great.
This one bear wouldn't let it go.
I know, yeah.
It's next to the portable hole company.
Yeah.
But a whole different, back then down in Sausalito, I mean, during World War II, they would build Liberty ships and they would knock them out in a week. These are like 200-foot steel ships they would build in a week. This was all done right here, where now it's a lot of tourists are walking around.
Right.
So there's a lot of history. And so he was down here, and then he was a commercial fisherman. And then my mom and dad started Casas Marina, which was the first sailing rental place business in the Bay Area. This was 1958.
Wow.
And then he actually had a fish dock where they used to tie up like 200 boats and unload and buy fish.
Right.
Just there's so much history that he's done down here,
And Sausalito's kind of transformed over those decades. Because right now I would argue it's one of the very upscale parts of the Bay Area. But
for sure.
At that time, it was probably more of like the outskirts that you were at if you didn't want to live in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, that was right. It was, there's a difference. There was definitely right in the 50s. I wasn't really around then to see it, but like when I was a kid, in the 70s and 80s, hanging out around here, it was like there was definitely the waterfront people, and then there was the hill people. Yeah. And the hill people definitely had some money.
I love that there was hill people.
There's hill people. Yeah, exactly.
Stay away.
Please come capture me, Hill Pearson. I never said that, but well, maybe sometimes when the water was leaking on my forehead, or the boat was leaking, or we had to row in to get water, then I was like, I wish we had a faucet.
Those hill people might be onto something. Yeah.
So you guys did have a house, but you just spent most of your time on boats.
Well, we were, my mom and dad went separate ways when I was like 6 years old. So my mom lived in San Rafael, and she was a waitress and eventually a school teacher, but so it wasn't pulling in a lot of money,
Right.
So living very, very tight. And then my dad was living in Sausalito, so they were friends. So I would go back and forth, 50% of the time at least. I was, taking a bus down here from San Rafael, which was like 10 miles away when I started when I was 10 years old. Hopping on a bus that commutes back and forth.
Wow.
So yeah, I was down here a lot. Didn't live here so much full time, although my sisters, older sisters did a little bit before that, but was definitely down here a lot,
Right.
So
people living in sort of less than desirable sort of boating communities, those typically don't turn into race car drivers.
No.
So
not well.
Fish.
Usually you become a fisherman, and that's what you are.
Depends if it's on the yacht community.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
then you probably do become a race car driver.
Not on the yacht.
That's more for the hill people.
Yeah, the hill people.
The hill people. Those people might go into racing. But
no, we had we had guys like Bugle Tom. Every
what was Bugle Tom like?
Bugle Tom as the sun set, he was playing his bugle off the back of his boat, and his boat. We're talking about barely a houseboat. His boat was half of it was painted red and half of it was painted green.
Of course.
Yeah,
his
naturally.
bicycle was also painted that way. His Volkswagen Bug
was
also painted that way. I mean, like every person, Boats Wayne, Tugboat Tom or whatever. Everybody had. There was always something, so it was very unique.
What cartoon did you live in?
I know, seriously, it was. I know.
Was it Bugle Tom?
It was like something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, that's awesome. That's our first bugle story we've had on the podcast.
All right, narc that. Wait, so did you have a nickname? Memo is actually a nickname, isn't it?
No, that's another just craziness, with my background, because I actually wasn't born in the United States.
Right.
So Jose Guillermo Gidley, which is Mexican.
You're basically born in the Baja area.
I was born in, La Paz, Mexico, and because we lived sort of back and forth down there, and my dad was very social, had a lot of friends, working class. So United Mexican Godfather, because of we lived down there, and so anyway, Jose Guillermo, and so Jose is my first name, which I've been thrown out of class before when I was actually in high school, because the substitute said Jose Gidley, and they thought they were going to get someone Mexican. And I said here,
and they're like,
they said, Jose Gidley here. They said, you're out of here.
That's
I'm like,
awesome. Jake Wellen.
See?
Yeah. So
how old were you when you first came to the States then?
Oh, I was
pretty early, like almost immediately kind of thing?
Like a year and a half.
Okay, yeah.
But
so before you can remember.
Yeah, but another interesting story. I mean, we were, actually I just saw the boat again today or yesterday or the day before. It's a 28-foot friendship sloop sailboat. My parents used to sail back and forth. So I was born down there, and a year and a half afterwards I was brought back up here. But my dad had a bag of lemons that he didn't want to turn into customs. I swear to you. I swear to you.
Oh, wow.
Who hasn't heard that old story?
Right. So we sailed right around where we were supposed to check in, like San Diego or something like that.
Wow.
And sailed right up. And then.
So your dad had like a lemon coyote service.
Well, so you were smuggled in, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Well, not only this is kind of you're not going to tell anybody,
About
right?
to say, I
Do
don't know
you
what the
have a
statute of
driver's
limitations
license now? Like,
Not only am I Mexican, but I was actually smuggled into the country.
Yeah,
so
that sounds about right.
That's
Technically,
amazing.
I'm a wetback too, but sort of.
that's staying in.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, good thing we're not in Arizona.
So,
Well, you know the funny thing about that is when I got won the Team USA scholarship with Jeremy Shaw that one year, I needed to get a passport. Well, so I went down. I never had a
I was
passport
about to say, you
before.
didn't have a birth certificate or anything, did you?
Right, and I never really had a passport because I'd never been out of the country, let alone barely flying on an airplane before. And so I
wow.
went down to San Francisco to passport, and they said, okay, pull out your birth certificate. And my mom was there, and she goes, well, pulled it out, and it was a Mexican birth certificate. She goes, okay, where's the blah, blah, blah? My mom's like, well, it was the 70s. We didn't stop, and they're like,
there was this bag of limes.
they're like, you're going to have to go to window 13, or something like that. And
Oh,
they
wow.
just eventually approved it, but
Yeah.
it was pretty funny.
It was
so
a really good bag of lemons.
I had to get my passport. Yeah, I know. It's a great bag of lemons, man. We weren't stopping. So.
And history was made.
That is,
Wow.
that's my favorite
There's,
story.
I mean, there's so many stories. It's just, yeah.
So, because you grew up kind of down in this area, do you
Yeah.
still see, guys that were living on boats when you were a kid, and do they remember you from that time
Is
period?
Bugle Tom still there?
Yeah, is people
Yeah.
time like
A lot of
Guillermo?
them. Yeah, a lot of them. Actually, always sad with life, but a lot of the guys that you remember, they passed away, because they were older. But old guys, when I was a kid, less than barely a teenager. But still, then there's guys that were, in their 50s or whatever it was, and now they're in their 70s or something, and they know my last name. They know me from being this little kid roaming around. So it's very cool, And now that that my fiance and I live in Sausalito and I'm down here, my boat's down here, but I see people and it's just it's just a reunion like almost all the time,
So if you're like Bugle Tom and you live down there in the water,
Bugle Tom. Wait, that's my nickname?
no, you're not Bugle Tom.
Okay.
You're
I'm living the lifestyle. Of
You're
Bugle Tom.
Lemon Memo.
That's me. Yeah.
So
if you like lemons.
if you're Bugle Tom and you don't have a house, and I'm assuming much other possessions, do you do like a Viking funeral where they like put you on a wooden plank and like light you on fire and send you into the bay? Because I would sign up for that.
Yeah,
in a
I would say.
heartbeat. Like,
it sounds good to me too. I
yeah,
think,
like,
it's
like everybody
possible.
shoots like flaming arrows into the water. There's,
Bugle
like-
Tom's playing.
Yeah, Bugle Tom's playing
He's
himself.
absolutely playing,
Right.
yeah.
The next day you're still floating out there. They're like, hey,
I'm still
hey,
here,
this is
guys."
a problem now.
Blow.
Yeah, you never know.
I don't want to change the subject to
Yeah,
something
no, I'm
serious
kinda-
because lemon Memo's like
Have you seen Planet of the Apes?
Dawn
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
you live in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, because like this is all I think about now is just gorillas running around because this is basically where it takes place.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
they-
is the area. They're
They like
north of
let
the
him
bridge.
go at the top of the hill right up here.
Ah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
After the helicopter crashed on the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
So
That the
literally
monkeys are
all I'm
flying.
looking for now is
We-
Caesar.
We get the wrong turn on the way up here because Siri told us a little early, and he's like, "Hurry up! There's gorillas around here." I was like,
Yeah, I
"Oh."
wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff around here. It may just been a movie back then, but it might be real. You never know, So.
That's anything in San Francisco.
Doesn't surprise me.
No, so did your fiance grow up in that kind of environment? Because that's unique to you.
She's
That's not. I don't think
she's
Brian
hill
and I have
people.
that. Yeah.
She's hill
Is
people.
she hill people?
Actually, no, working class because she's Japanese and her family
All right.
immigrated here.
I like where this is going.
Yeah, and actually, when they first immigrated from Japan.
Oh, she's actually from Japan, not Japanese American.
Yeah, she was
Okay.
actually born here.
Okay.
But they came over here, and when they came over here, they were picking crops in Modesto in the valley.
Crazy. Okay.
So that's how and then they were gardeners, and then and now her mom's pretty successful, or a lot of the family. So yeah, we have a similar background. It's just they were in the fields, and I was on the water, sort of in the fields,
Right.
So.
So can you fish? Are you like an avid fisherman?
Oh,
or?
horrible! My dad was a commercial fisherman for like 30 years, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that I never got into.
Right. Do you even do it for fun, or just not your thing at all?
I never. Actually, I went salmon fishing like a year and a half ago on my sailboat, and caught one salmon. Or 2 years ago, think it was more than 2.5 years ago, something like that. But yeah, I caught one salmon, and yeah, it was fun. But I'd rather also be just out on the water or hoisting a sail and going sailing.
Sure,
so.
sure. I hear you.
Or starting up a motor and going fast, whatever.
Right. Do you run your jet skis down here in the bay?
Yeah, not right in front here, but up in the North Bay. That's where I basically used to. Yeah, North Bay. I'd drop buoys because it's shallower and it's not, and I used to live up in the North Bay area. So yeah, in the bay in salt water is not a problem.
That's cool.
Yeah, you can't get the jet ski stuff. They don't like you dropping buoys next to like people's boats and stuff like that.
You're like, no, I'm gonna be turning here.
Yeah, you can't.
For an hour.
The Coast Guard's not so into that, so you can't really do it like right here where everybody, the Spinnaker restaurant is or whatever. So, but
it's not running right, guys. Give me a half an hour to fix this.
Yeah, I know.
Clearing it out.
Are you able to jet ski right now?
Actually, I went to a jet ski race. My daughter and I went to a jet ski race like maybe 8 months ago, but no, can't jet ski. I did stand up a jet ski, but it's like anything. It's like, yeah, I drove a race car the other day, but I didn't drive it at speed.
Yeah,
so
right.
Not really the same thing. I just sort of cruised around,
Yeah, and just sort of get that sensation again.
Just sort of get out there and make sure that, it all runs, So,
right.
Yeah.
So, because no one can see you, because this is on the internet.
They can't?
No.
Oh, I thought there was a camera over there.
Yeah,
we're not that good. So
budget's going up next year.
It's actually been the
Season
joke
2.
is that we're assuming our biggest critique will be like the video wouldn't work.
The video, yeah. Where was the video?
It's a podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that either, so my fiance had to tell me that. I'm like, they're filming. It's a podcast and they're filming. She goes, "What are you talking about? There's no film." I go, "Oh, well, let me check the emails."
So when we got here, you look totally normal to me. Like you're the
Yeah.
Memo Gidley I remember seeing last time. So, everything still appears to be where it should be.
Yeah.
You look like you could jump in a race car right now. Where are you weight-wise compared to before your big crash?
I'm actually the same.
Okay.
Basically 160 pounds,
Yeah.
which is kind of the same. So
Yeah, because you look ready to go right now.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's it. First thing I thought, I'm like,
Are you hitting on me?
he's good.
I have
It's
a
fine.
fiance, right?
I
You know
mean,
that?
I'm
Okay.
more into like the bigger ones, like Sean.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's why I chose this trip.
Life on the road for weeks.
But you're a little too small for my taste.
yeah.
No, I mean,
You play your cards right, though. Winter's coming, the holidays.
Man, I was just making a joke, but now he's being serious.
Now it's a
What the
thing.
heck?
I'll get
I
out.
told him I had a fiance. Now he's
Start of a bad romantic comedy. Get a couple gorillas.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened.
So
No, I'm good. I mean, I say good, but I mean, you got to realize like the last 2 years, although 2 years ago, or just about 2 years ago, was difficult. But I've been to physical therapy, and at first it was, but now I do. Not as intense as everything, but I'm back riding my mountain bike, not every other day or every day like I was before. But doing that, I swim laps. I'm lifting weights. I'm doing cardio. So I do all the same stuff, just not the intensity.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just not far. As soon as I'm cleared, basically good to then I can train a little bit harder, and I'll be good to go. You know. So it's.
When is the surgery slated?
Well, it's slated for January 11th right now, and the doctor's very on demand, so it was like it took 3.5 months to finally.
So it's not a healing thing for you as much as an availability.
Availability, yeah. I mean, honestly, if they say let's go tomorrow, then I'm
good.
there tomorrow.
Okay.
So it's just the recovery from that is about 6 months of not being able to lift something like more than 10 pounds.
Okay.
So I can't do kind of like what I'm doing right
sort of
now.
exercise,
So
sure.
I'd rather get it done during the wintertime
Yeah.
because summertime I'm more actively coaching or racing or doing something like that.
Right,
And
right.
plus just get it done sooner,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Well, is there an expected? I mean, I hate to go there, but is there an expected kind of painful time after that beyond the ability to lift?
no, there's no painful. I mean, the back fusion is not a painful thing right now. There are some muscle soreness because the muscles are working extra hard because they're trying to stabilize the vertebrae right now, and some things like that. But it's basically just getting the operation, and it's a couple days in the hospital, and then it's not a painful. Actually, after a lot of and I've had a few like operation on the knees, operation this, that, whatever afterwards, and it's like some of my best time spent was like as soon as I woke up from the surgery because like you're pain free, and so
Right.
I'm just like, this feels great.
That's when you get the
Just
good
keep me
stuff.
right here,
Yeah.
So So yeah, it shouldn't be a lot of pain. It's just more of an inconvenience of just like, okay, another 6 months on top of this.
Right.
You know.
And how's the is it Mari? Is that her name?
Yeah, Madi actually.
Madi,
it's sort of rolled the R.
How's she been in this whole thing?
Oh, she's been great. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely put her through the ringer.
Sure.
My mom, who's also local. I mean, those are basically the two people that have been able to do so much for me.
Right.
And honestly, I mean, you know, first driving around in a streetcar, them taking me to my appointments. I mean, they would literally hit a reflector, run over a reflector in the street, and I would sort of yell at them.
Right.
Really?
You know, not yell at them, but
it was that
I would.
painful.
Yeah, and so everything, you know, it was like, or they would hit the brakes. I mean, I you know, honestly, I'm not happy to say this, but for sure I made my mom's eyes tear up because sometimes she would hit the brakes too hardly, and I was like, Mom, don't stop so suddenly like that.
Yeah.
Ease off at the end.
Right.
But I was like, you know, so anyway.
Do you think part of that's because you're having to be driven and you're, you know, a professional race car driver and you're having to be driven to the doctor by your mom because of the situation, or is it just it was physically
pain.
just the pain?
Just pain.
Yeah.
So both of them have been through a ton, but no, it's physically just pain.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love being driven around. I mean, I'm like, no, you drive.
You got it.
We need more bean bags.
Yeah. But both of them, I mean, they just have been, you know, because they're dealing with everything, and there's just it's been a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So it's definitely but Madi has been put through the ringer. My mom's been put through the ringer, and you know, they're definitely the most that have been pushed the hardest, you know. So. And
knowing you, they know you're going to get back in a race car. Like, it's what's going to happen as soon as you're ready to go again.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think. I mean, nobody's said, oh no, you shouldn't or you can't.
Right.
You know. I mean, it's you know, you can. I think you can. My whole, you know, opinion is that you can kind of get hurt doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's. I always said before that, you know, when I would get hurt, you know, but that's more like a bruise or something like that. I'd say, well, that's the price you pay for having fun, or having this kind of fun, and that's kind of it, you know. So, not that I'm going to jeopardize not being healed before I get back in there and do something stupid. Because what I went through was very, you know, it was just hard to deal with. So I'm going to make sure I'm strong. But I'm doing most everything right now. Just need a little bit more.
Right.
You know,
So, do you remember the incident?
No, thank goodness.
Isn't that the best thing ever when you have a big one?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I don't. I remember a couple of people coming to see me when I was in the care unit there. Right. But I laugh because it's not funny, but I only remember a couple. There was a whole bunch of people that came.
Yeah.
But Jordan Taylor came and he brought me an Atari or something like that.
Jordan Taylor's the man.
He brought me something, and I was like, right on. I forget which game it was, but I remember like a couple minutes of that. And he's like, yeah, you can play this. I'm like, all right, you know. And
he's like sitting on the corner of your bed, like, let me get in on it.
Yeah. So,
you're doing it wrong. Let me show you. Yeah.
Yeah, but and then a couple other things. I remember like, you know, the nurse and trying to like. Well, actually, I remember afterwards someone gave me flowers, and so I like gave her the flowers.
Here you go.
All right.
Yeah.
But then also I remember she was like trying to give me some medication. I'm like, this is the temple. I'm not taking that.
Oh, you're that guy.
Are you like an anti-medicine guy?
Well, no, I just
don't
like to take drugs, you know?
Sure, right.
Just like no drugs.
I saved your life.
It's
like, shut up and take it.
Yeah.
So, you know,
not much remembrance then. Yeah.
But that's always been one of the things I've been wondered about. You know, like one of the first things you always hear about when somebody sort of comes to from an accident is there's always the thank everyone for their well wishes and support. Do you remember like the first time you really got to look at your email or check a Facebook message or something like that and see, you know, however many people had reached out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot. You know, a lot of people were basically emailing me, you know, texting me and stuff like that. I mean, it took me a while just to get through the texts on my phones, you know?
Yeah, right.
And then the emails, you know, I mean, I was like responding and like.
Because you've got to be half out of it during all this.
Yeah, more than half out of it.
Right.
But I remember responding in like April, May, June, and you know, people started emailing me January, February, and so I'm still, you know, and you know, didn't respond to everybody, but it was trying to get back to people, you know. But yeah, at first you're just, you know, you're in this sort of like weird sort of world where it's just stuff's a little bit cloudy,
Yeah.
So, but part of it is because you're on a lot of medication.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
thankfully.
But yeah, but definitely, you definitely appreciate, everybody that's, checking in and sort of pushing you on. It's, I mean, honestly, it's like I tell people, that it's, I'm pretty lucky because, or fortunate because there's a lot of people that go through incidents like I've been through.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't at Daytona and they weren't in weren't in the 99 car, which is kind of cool. But they were just walking down the street, or they were, who knows what. But they don't have, maybe they have some family, maybe they don't,
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I was pretty fortunate to get that support. So.
Do you go back and look at it?
The video?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back and looked at it for sure. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't. It's not like I'm the guy driving because I'm watching it.
Well, I was going to say, it's got to be
there's
weird.
no other memory.
The associate's like, well, that was clearly me. So.
Yeah, but from my standpoint, I definitely want to look at it and see what happened.
Right.
Because once you realize that you've been in a wreck and it's serious, then it's like, well, what actually happened,
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, so to me, here's sort of a weird adapted question to that is you did have a big one at Long Beach in a DP a few years before, and then there was Road America in Champ Car.
Yeah.
So as weird as it sounds, like you've been through this, while not as severe, you've been through it in a weird way. Does that kind of help you in sort of the recovery process?
Not really, because Long Beach will, the Ganassi car, the Indy car at Road America, I was racing 2 weeks later.
Right,
so I was a little sore, and although it was horrific to watch, and they called the code whatever it was, which basically meant that I probably wasn't around.
Right.
I was actually, I didn't stay in the hospital that night. I was back in my hotel and was back racing. And Long Beach, it was very painful for a while when I moved around, but again, I was back in a car in 2 months, you know? So it just happened so, you recovered so quickly that it doesn't really, the comparative to what went on, what I went through was definitely not even in the, it's just a whole lot different. So.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I can understand
It was,
that.
it was definitely, it was challenging, I mean, like I said, the people that we just talked about and other people that were around me, but it's like, it just puts you, you're just not the same person you are normally. Normally I'm pretty happy and, fun, friendly kind of guy, but when you're in that kind of circumstance, you're very short, because it's just so, it's just not fun.
Right.
So, yeah.
I was really impressed by the amount of support all the fans showed. There was a lot of tweets and Facebook posts and everything.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to, A, the community of racing, but also B, your character as a well-liked guy that, had to kind of work your way up. And I always admired you because I came from being a mechanic. Like, I have zero family money. My dad was a crew chief in IMSA in the 80s, and, I basically had to work on race cars to get involved.
Cool. I didn't know
so
that about
when you got your big breaks with the Indy cars, I'd known that you'd lived in your car and that you were still racing shifter carts on a regular basis to try to stay sharp. And I had raced shifter carts very briefly because I knew a guy that had an extra one. He'd rent it to me, basically, And so it was like when I saw you go into Champ Car or Indy car, Champ Car at the time, and do well, I was like, oh man, that's awesome. Like a regular guy who lived in his truck for months can go race against the best guys in the world, do well. And it was honestly for me a bit of a wake-up call, okay, just keep working at it and you'll get it. So I think when you got injured in this one, it was like, oh man, what's this guy got to do to catch a break? You're in a car that can win the race, you're running well.
I know.
And then it goes south. Obviously you can't reply to every post and you were preoccupied with recovery, but is there anything you would, say to the fans if they were all listening to this, which
they're all listening.
20 of them
all
are.
Of them.
At least 20 are listening.
19 of them. It's just, it's, I don't know what to say. It's just nice to have people in your corner for sure. That's why you have coaches, or that's why you have people that are behind you,
Can you flip it up a little bit towards your mouth?
Yeah. So, I just, I try and enjoy myself at the track and you guys sort of got a little bit of idea of what my background was like, but racing cars wasn't part of the plan.
Right.
And so, and I went to my first race, and 7 years after I went to my first race, or after I went to my first race, 3 months later, I was working as a mechanic,
Yeah.
Jim Russell, and then 7 years later, I was racing for Derek Walker because 7 years I went to the top. So that's kind of cool. But then also just met a lot of people and was just really always appreciative of. I just like being around people that are interested in the stuff I'm interested in.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It paid off in a way. I wasn't doing it just for any particular reason other than I enjoyed it, but it was nice to have that support when things are tough. It's trust me, there was like many days, multiple times a day when I'm like, things. I mean, honestly, for the first few months, if life stayed as it was for the first few months and that was the way it was going to be for forever, honestly, and like I told my family, I would take one more sale out and that would be it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, so, having people that sort of, help you through it is definitely great. So
Right.
I appreciate everybody that's been behind me, and there's just so many, and it's been really nice.
What was the pain like for those first few months? I mean, where was it coming from, and what was the trigger?
It was horrible. It was if you could imagine that the trigger was just all the nerve damage.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like getting a broken leg. I mean, the broken bones and all that sort of stuff. If you don't stand on it, then you're fine.
Right.
But I was having pain all the time.
Yeah.
And it was like basically how to best describe it is if someone took a ball peen hammer, a metal hammer, and you were lying on your stomach and they just repeatedly hit you on your tailbone, just repeatedly hit you. So the point that there were many times, many times throughout the day, but many times throughout the first few months where I would just yell out.
Right.
Because
you just have this tinge of pain that just
it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
I was like whimpering a lot, but that was just, just dealing with it, but literally like yell out. So it was just like the hammer. So it was just, that's the best way to describe it.
Right.
Now it's gone down to, annoying toothache.
Yeah.
So, a lot easier to deal with. And sometimes the toothache subsides and sometimes it gets worse, but it's not like the ball peen hammer on the tailbone, bone to hammer all the time, which was horrible at one point. So, yeah.
What you had me at ball peen hammer.
I know. Yeah.
But so kind of going back to Bugle Time and happier times in Sausalito, what
Bugle Tom?
Where?
I thought you said
bags.
Bugle Time.
Bugle
Time.
like, oh
Bugle
man,
Time.
how old is this guy?
But you weren't a hill person, so
Right.
so it wasn't like you could just go and buy yourself a Formula Ford ride or go buy yourself a shifter cart.
No.
How did that even start?
My Uncle John took me said, hey, you want to go to an IndyCar race at Laguna Seca? I said, okay. Not only had I never been to a car race, I'd never seen one on TV, never watched one. None of my parents, nobody that I knew ever watched TV or watched IndyCar race. So went down but I was racing dirt bikes since I was 11 years old, motocross. But that was something that sort of the average person could afford. I had a job. My dad kicked in a little, and we went and raced dirt bikes. So I definitely had the racing bug, which started even before that, but had the racing bug. And so I went down to the IndyCar race and was just amazed. I mean, this was like in the early 90s. And like that was when there were like, if you got there like 9 or 10 in the morning,
there was like
you had
one
to park
road
down the hill, get in a bus, and come up.
Right.
There was like 100,000 plus people there, and the people didn't. It wasn't like the people was part of the excitement, but then just seeing the cars and watching the racing, I was like, this is I want to do this.
Right.
This is my career. I was in junior college at the time, and I think in my third year, and the only thing I was really interested was maybe being a park ranger because I was outside. So I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to race these Indy cars, And so I signed up for, walking through the paddock, and a flyer popped in my hand about being a mechanic and racing for free, racing formula cars for free.
So this is the Russell Mechanic Training Program?
Yeah.
I wanted to do that.
Really?
Because like a bunch of kids were telling me about it.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I met a guy on the AOL auto racing chat forum that lived down in like where's Petaluma.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm going to do this thing. That's where a bunch of guys did it. And I think Memo did it. And all that. I'm like, we're doing it. And of course, it never happened. But you should explain what that is, because a lot of people don't have a clue what that offered. But it did produce champ car driver Memo Gidley, for example.
Absolutely. It was, unfortunately, it's not around anymore.
Yeah.
But basically, the Jim Russell School at the time, they had a fleet of cars and they needed to maintain. So, in order, instead of paying, having all the staff to pay for it, they came up with this great idea, which was, we'll get volunteers basically to sign up for a year program. They have to work on the cars.
Right.
They learn that experience of, we're training them to be mechanics. They're learning about race cars. And also they get to drive once a month. They get to go through the beginning school, the advanced school, and then they get to race in the mechanics series race once a month. And so it was awesome. I mean, the problem is you didn't earn any money when you were down there. So
yeah, you had to basically put yourself up if you were from anywhere else.
So you'd have to have like an actual paying job to then pay for your job as a mechanic at the Russell School.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I was basically, barely, working, just going through college. But I was down there not getting paid. But then I ran out of money in about 3 months, and then I started delivering pizzas at night for Domino's Pizza. And but it was great because it basically, I remember the first lunch down there. There used to be 25 or 30 people, mechanics that were in the same program that would start 4 times, different times during the year.
Right.
And down there the first time, so I was part of the new crowd, and there was like maybe 6 or 7 people starting out at that month, and they're like talking about Mario Andretti or Michael Andretti, and I'm like, I was like, who's Andretti? Who are I literally?
Oh my God!
No, I swear to you, I literally knew nothing about it.
Right. You just liked it.
Yeah. And, right. And I remember
such a little catty community. Like, oh my God, this guy.
They were like, this guy's he's clueless. He's gonna drop out. It's like, what
He'll never make it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was great because it gave me, like I had a passion for doing it, and it started to get me some seat time, Yeah. And then when I was down there, then, it starts networking you. And then one of the instructors was this guy named George Barrows, who was an instructor for Jim Russell at the time, but then it was also raced go-karts for Track Magic, who was the manufacturer in San Francisco. So after that was sort of going on and done, and, then he was like, hey, well, Fausto, who owns Track Magic, he's looking for a driver. You should talk to him. So I went to talk to him. He said, yeah, I'll give you this and go do it. And then that turned into being paid to race go-kart. It's like it just starts this process that if you're good enough and you work hard enough, which is, I wouldn't say natural talent, but if you have a passion to do it, you learn whatever it is pretty quickly.
Yep.
And if you work hard enough, then sort of it doesn't give everybody the opportunity because there's not a lot out there, but there is a possibility.
Yeah, it increases your chances.
So.
Well, and that karting scene at that time, I raced.
Awesome.
You and I both raced Regional 11 karts, and we're just enough different in age that we didn't race in the same class. But you look at the names, there's like you and Scott Speed and AJ and Joey Hand, and it is incredible the crop that came out of Regional 11 at the time.
A ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I don't know what it was, but there were a number of factories like Emic, Invader, Track Magic, High Rev. They were basically in this area, so they all had their factory drivers. But we also raced on these horrible tires. And I know, you talk to your grandpa or your father and like, oh, we used to have to walk, barefoot in the snow uphill both ways. But I'm telling you, these YBMs, which they called them at the time, they were the hardest, suckers to race on ever. And I don't know. I think that helped. That's what I think.
Right.
But it was great competition, and like so many people came out of this area, like you said.
Yeah.
And like just did really well.
Right.
So it was just a great place to race. It was an awesome place.
Yeah.
Do you remember anybody from the mechanics training program, like any of the other mechanics, did they go on to become racers of note?
No, not really. There was one other guy, Rick McCormick, who was just a few months before me, and he actually raced, I think it was like Herbalex or something in Trans Am.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he got pretty high up, and he raced Trans Am, but there was nobody else that they're burglars, I'm telling you. They're burglars. No, I know them. They just, I'm not tied up. This is just a cord that's attached to these earphones.
The fiancé has arrived. Hello.
Hey there. How are you? Good. Oh, they want to talk to you too.
Get me out of here.
Yeah. But
So Rick McCormick ran like Trans Am or something?
yeah, Rick McCormick raced Trans Am and did really well, and but not a lot of other mechanic. A lot of them were successful mechanics, though.
Right, yeah.
I mean, working for IndyCar teams, and I still see guys out there to this day. So
my two friends that went through it, Chris Nelson and Steve Burrows, they both went on to work on all sorts of stuff. Steve actually currently works in Global Rallycross, but he worked at Panther when Hornish was there, and he was winning the 500 and stuff. So
yeah,
they definitely produce good mechanics.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I'm remembering this right. You got your own car that you had to work on, and then do you remember who drove it? Like throughout, did anybody? Because I know Scott Speed came through the school and a couple others.
No, you didn't get your own car. You mean when you were a mechanic in the training program?
Yeah, for some reason I felt like you kept a car throughout, so it was just working on a fleet then.
Working on a fleet, yeah.
Okay.
Working on a fleet. It was, they would, so they'd have all the customer races, and it was really big at the time. Like we'd have like 3 groups of 12 or 15 guys and customers. And then the last race of the day was always the mechanics race because a lot of times there weren't a lot of cars left.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, every car, we just worked on them as fleets. So it's just, I think the biggest thing about it, you learned some stuff about race cars, but the biggest thing was you really learned is if you wanted to do it. Because basically we were working, all the mechanics, we were getting there at least 8 o'clock on normal days. And we weren't done till like 6 or 7 o'clock on normal days, let alone race weekends.
Right.
And it wasn't like, there was, a lot of people, a lot of girls walking around the pits, or
right.
I mean,
the whole glamour of racing thing wasn't there.
Glamour wasn't there,
Weird.
So it was like a lot of people dropped out. So if you stayed in it, then you sort of got respect from everybody around you, but you also kind of, that was something that you wanted to pursue,
right.
And you're working for free, so a lot of you are having other jobs or trying to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, a lot of them were just, or they had a little bit of support, they all lived in, there was like a, place where a lot of mechanics lived, so it was much cheaper and things like that. So, or they were just scraping by. Most of them were, if you've got money to go racing, then you're usually you're usually one of the customers that was there. But the mechanics, they didn't have the money to go racing, so they were basically scraping by. So.
Was there ever an attitude of like, oh, F these guys, they could afford to do it?
Well, yeah, sometimes.
We're the same.
Come on, we all do that with everybody, right? But a lot of cool guys. Even the customers, some of them, they all had money, but or some money, but enough to go racing anyway, and some a lot more. But I met a lot of, like this one guy, Steve Adderholt, who went down through. There was a customer, and I didn't really sort of remember him except like literally 7 or 8 or 9 years later. He contacted me. He's like, he called my mom. I want to sponsor him at the Indy 500. I said, no, just come out and see me race, and we'll reconnect.
Yeah, let's just hang out.
Yeah, but he became one of my best friends.
That's cool.
And not like because he sponsored me at doing stuff, just because we hung out, we started sailing together and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
But so met a lot of good sort of customers that turned into friends
Right.
down there too. So it was really. Yeah. We all had the passion to race. That's the thing, So some people had money and we didn't, but we were all down there for the same reason.
Right.
So it was very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
If that program doesn't exist now, and the economy of racing even today has changed, if that Memo Gidley at that age was around today, do you think you'd still be able to have made it?
Yeah, I think so. It's just how do you do it? But yeah, there are ways out there. We had. It was great for me great in a sense because there was like the Jim Russell program, and then there was like, the Track Magic where they were paying me to race go-karts. And then it was like, I was at a go-kart race and some guy called me like after the weekend, said, hey, I met you at the go-kart race. You did really well, you won, and I want to introduce you to my boss, And so I introduced him to my boss, his boss, and then he came out and drove his Formula 4 2000, and he said, I'll buy you a car and a motor. And then it's one thing leads, the Peggy Haas's of the world, Lynx Racing. There's just like, there's still those opportunities. It's just, you got to be the guy. You got to be the person that's really wants it bad, and then you got to have a little luck on your side too.
Right,
So yeah.
So with the,
I would do it still.
Right.
Definitely.
With the Daytona crash over 2 years ago. It's
almost
coming up on 2 years.
Yeah, it's a few months away, but yeah, almost.
What was the process? So you wake up in the hospital, I'm assuming just down the street in Daytona.
Yeah.
And then did NASCAR or Grand Am, I guess we should call it, did they come in and take care of how the process went? Did they line you up with doctors? And because we're supposed to be protected under that, bubble of the sanctioning body when something like this goes wrong, and especially in this case where it's clearly a bit of a structural failure with the chassis. I mean, it's an accident that no one prepares for, hitting basically a stopped car at that kind of speed. What was what's your takeaway with how the incident was handled from the support for your side in terms of medical treatment, safety, and so forth?
It was great. I mean, it was great. It was I mean, Jim France was over in the hospital,
That's amazing.
Not only was I in his wing, which was named after him. He must have donated some money to that hospital, I think. But,
right.
But no, he was down there, and that's just, I mean, he sort of sets the tone for that racing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, NASCAR was there big time,
right.
And also, John Gorsline, who I've been insured with for many, many years, he was there. There's just a lot of people for sure.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the expense on how much, I don't know if you've ever had an operation and seen how much it costs. Well, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. I mean, like a knee that I had, orthoscopic, the second time after, which is they go in there and smooth out the cartilage through a little hole. It's not even an incision. And I was in and out of the hospital, or the surgery center in 3 hours. It was $70,000, or at least that's what it was originally billed to somebody for.
Right.
I know they negotiate it down, but it's a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy. So it's definitely. There's a lot of people that sort of saved my ass on that deal.
Right.
Yeah. Because of their support. Which is just good.
And
nice.
And how it should go, based on the way it's supposed to be handled. I
Yeah.
ask because a good friend of mine, David Thelenius, had a crash also at Daytona in an ST car.
Yeah.
And it was very bad. He basically broke almost all the bones on the left side of his upper body.
Oof.
And knocked himself unconscious. Had to cut the car apart to get him out, etc. And I mean, he basically woke up to a NASCAR nurse standing next to him, saying, "Here's what's going on. Here's what's happening." And they took care of him all the way. And he lives out in LA, so they made sure he got back safely. When he was able to travel, and kept up with him to the point of like 6 months later when he was back to mobile. They're like, "Hey, come to the Fontana NASCAR race."
Nice.
So I was always curious to hear how it was handled from your side, since David has such great things to say about how it all went down.
It's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, the series, any series is sort of, or any business is sort of, starts at the. It's basically, led by the top down, sort of, so to speak. And so, like I said, I mean, I've always had, tons of, like Jim France a lot. Not only does he come to the racetracks, but he talks to you, and he's nice, and he's a real kind of guy. And so it's sort of, you sort of, get to see if he puts his money sort of, so to speak, where his mouth is.
Right.
Not that he said but he's just that. It just sort of trickles down.
Guy.
Yeah. So the series NASCAR, I mean, it's great, and just a lot of people, but NASCAR has been great.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Has that changed your outlook on safety at all? I mean, there was always a lot of concern of a DP having a frontal impact like that.
Yeah.
And do you look at things now and advocate differently or look at it differently?
Well, it's so hard to say. I mean, there's so much stuff. I mean, somehow making it safer would be great. I mean, I was racing champ cars when there weren't Hans devices, and the Penske driver at Laguna Seca got a little throttle, and then basically snapped his head off. So so it's like, what can we do to make things better? I gotta imagine, although I haven't really been part of it, I gotta imagine there's hopefully some improvements made. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, it works from both ways, from a safety standpoint, but also, I mean, I don't think I knew that there was a car going slowly on the track.
Right.
I don't think there was a yellow flag. Because he was still moving.
Right.
Only 5 or 6 miles an hour, but he was still moving.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's the combination of more awareness, or talking to drivers and making sure they all a race like Daytona, there's so many, and honestly a lot of them really don't speak English well. So
Did you and Matteo Malicelli ever cross paths?
it's one of the most disappointing things is he never once reached out to me.
Really?
And if I was in his situation, even if it was not my fault,
Right.
if I was the guy that got out of the hospital the next day and flew home, I would have just said, "Hey, how are you doing?" or something.
Yeah, man.
Right,
Crazy situation that tied us together. Yeah.
But I was the one that was out for many months, so I never, he would. Yeah, it's very disappointing that I never heard anything from him. So.
Yeah, that sucks.
I
that
never knew
sucks.
that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll keep that in mind.
It helps his career didn't last much longer at that team. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, then at Sebring,
Sebring,
pulled out and took out like 3 or 4 cars, and they suspended him for a race.
Weird.
Yeah,
We're
and
talking about that
returned.
guy.
Yeah, it's the same guy.
About
Same
that.
guy. He should have been suspended before that. But
so strange that he didn't reach out.
Yeah.
Seems like such a good dude.
One day I'll see him at a track, so I don't know what I'll do. But
We'll do that thing where I'll like get down behind him
Yeah,
and you push him over.
Yeah.
We'll high five and be
Or
like,
get some whipped cream and like right in his face and then take some pictures. That's what we'll do. We'll show him.
punk. Man.
Not all his fault, but it's definitely a combination of things,
A text message.
Yeah, that's all.
You know
That's
what I
all.
mean? Like a text, at least. Interesting.
Yeah.
So we were with your good buddy Marshall Pruitt
Yeah.
earlier today for lunch, and so we do a segment where we sort of have a question from the previous guest that they pass on to the next one. So
From Marshall?
from Marshall.
I think because
It's going to be ugly.
he's cool, we can tell him what we thought was happening.
Okay.
Because it was.
You really want to go there?
Yeah, I
No,
do.
let's
because
go there.
Really want to go there.
No. So Marshall, Marshall. Marshall has a very
I
sort
do
of
know Marshall.
long way of sort of lingering on his next statement and question, which we love. But he's clearly he's thinking his way through and making sure every word is the right word. So he goes, he sits there and is like, I want to ask Memo, would he,
if he could
if
do
he
it
could
over
again,
or if he could do it differently, would he?
And we're both apparently we had the conversation like we independently
You
of
should've
each
given-
other. Our first one was like, turn right.
Yeah, I know.
Like, tell me he didn't say break. Like, tell me he's not going to say break, and it turned completely different. So that was our thought on the way up. We both said to each other, like,
It's like,
hey,
okay,
did
am I
you-
a horrible person if I think this?
I'm like, I honestly was like, no way he's going to say that. And of course he didn't, and we're the horrible people.
we're the assholes.
But
He
that's not
should have
really
asked you to
surprising.
write down. He should have started with that and then say, okay, write down what you think I'm going to say.
right. Where do you think I should go with this? So Marshall's question was, what would you do differently, or what could you have done differently to hold on to some of the more important IndyCar rides that you had, knowing what you know now, and in particular, like the Ganassi situation?
I'm not choking.
He's like,
I'm eating steak. Yeah, tell me more.
that dramatic pause, like, that guy.
I know.
it's like, okay, I'll remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I got to beat up Malicelli and Marshall.
And Dick Geese is getting an exclusive.
Well, the biggest thing with, go back to like 2000 before September, 2001 before September, and those 3 years or 2 years leading up to that. Like first I had 3 rides with Derek Walker because the Japanese driver broke his leg, and then I went to Dale Coyne and raced with him for a few races. So I had like 6 or 7 races that year. Then the next year it was with John De La Pena, and it was with players. I led my first laps at Long Beach, and so then I had like 10 races or something like that. Then Ganassi was the year after that, and I had like they fired Nicholas Manassian.
That's right. Yeah,
And so I got in after like the 3rd or 4th race, and so then I had like 12 races, something like that. Well, unfortunately, then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And so it went from basically 28 cars, like a strong, kick-ass field, to basically barely, not even 18 cars.
Right.
Like putting on the races the next year, there was rumors at a lot of tracks that they were breaking their contracts because there was a stipulation that it had to be 18 cars there minimum, and they didn't have it.
Right.
So those last 10 spots were for the guys that were coming up, proving themselves. That was their next opportunity. So with Ganassi, he'd already made plans before. I mean, he had Bruno Giancarlo signed still, and then he had already hired Kenny Brack at the time.
Kenny Brack at the time.
And so when I went to when my contract was up with him, I said, Chip or Michael or whoever I was talking to at the time, I said, hey, the contract's up, and back and forth. And Chip said he wanted to extend that option on you and just hang tight for a little bit. So it wasn't like I didn't have a ride. What they were trying to do is they're trying to get me into IRL because they had just started a team in IRL.
Right.
Well, also at the time, because they were new into IRL, the Speedway was pushing Jeff Ward on them big time to have a team. They wanted them to race Jeff Ward. So that was going to be my next ride with Ganassi, but that's why that didn't work out.
Right.
So there wasn't a whole lot I could do. I mean, the biggest thing was the economy, and would there have been other opportunities if Ganassi said no? Absolutely, because like literally with what did I do? Like initial day of testing with Derek Walker, that was it. I didn't do any testing and would show up and basically drive and almost won a race. I mean, I led, like lots of laps at various tracks, finished on the podium 3 times, and I never tested the car.
Right.
Never got in the car and tested it. So it was very like, when you look at the details, I did pretty good. And most people that knew, the teams, they knew that, hey, this guy's the real deal. But 9/11 happened, and they were looking for money, and they didn't have any place to go.
Yeah, right.
So there's nothing. So to Marshall's, to answer his question, there was really nothing I could do with those teams.
So I'm gonna write blame terrorists.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're gonna put down.
I mean, I worked as hard as possible. I mean, it wasn't because I
yeah.
wasn't in the car, I wasn't training, I wasn't pushing, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
Was I a championship winning driver at that point? Well, no, because I was just new into it.
Right.
I just came from.
You never tested.
Never tested, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
testing was.
But it is like if you see a guy show up in a car that's not doing the test days and he's running that well, like, okay, they got a good team going with a good driver over there.
Yeah.
If they had the budget, Ganassi or Penske or whatever, they'd
Oh,
be
yeah.
getting it done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, and a lot of those guys didn't even know either, but when you think about it, before that time, I went to my first race as a spectator 7 years before. And I came from, you guys didn't see my background, but where I came from, which we talked about it was so far removed from being a successful race car driver.
Yeah.
That it wasn't in the cards. No, it wasn't even
On the radar.
Thought process,
yeah. So anyway, there was nothing I could have done. I mean, I did everything I possibly could.
So I think the answer is I made it to Champ Car in 7 years.
Yeah.
Bitch.
Mic drop.
Bitch.
I don't think Marshall was, Marshall, we're friends,
Yeah.
and he's a big supporter. So he wasn't like asking me.
Not at all.
that.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was just curious, you
Yeah.
know, but
He was trying to help us get a story because he assumes it'll just
Maybe
be
a
fart
lot of-
jokes.
right.
Yeah. He's like, I gotta help these idiots.
And he's not wrong.
Really? No.
So to carry on in that direction, tomorrow we're meeting with Jill Campbell, who's the president of Laguna Seca or general manager.
She is the fill-in later.
Fill you in later?
Of Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca.
Edit, break,
Yeah.
Laguna Seca. She runs Laguna Seca.
Yeah, I know Jill a little bit.
Okay. Anything you could think to ask her, racing related or not?
Racing
Yeah, it could be like, what kind of soap do you use?
Yeah. It could be.
Yeah.
That sounds very interesting. I'm sure people want
We've
to know that.
had a question this week about it was last week about if you had to sit in someone's piss-filled seat in a driver change, who would it be?
Oh, I got a story about that. It's pretty
Yes,
funny.
you do.
Let's get into it.
Yes, you do.
You want to hear a quick story on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I was a teammate with Dion von Mulkey.
Yes.
And
Oh, finally! We've been
And-
waiting for a Dion story.
yeah. Well, we were at Fontana, not Fontana, with Florida. Whatever.
Homestead?
Homestead. Yeah, right. Homestead. And
Was this when he was driving the DP?
yeah, he was
Yeah.
driving the DP.
Okay.
And so it was hot as a mother out there, and of course we didn't, it was hot in this car as could be. And afterwards came in. I finished the race, and Dion's girlfriend got in the car. She goes, sit in the car. Sure. She got in the car. We're in the debrief lounge.
Oh, no.
And she comes back. She comes back after, and she's like, she's talked to Dion, and Dion goes, yeah, she said the seats got a lot of. It's really sweaty. You must have been really hot. I go, well, tell her it's not exactly all sweat. So anyway, it didn't happen to Dion, but maybe he had suffered something because of that afterwards. Who knows? But
So, our buddy
don't sit in race cars after.
Right.
Not advisable.
Our buddy Oriel Servia started describing that he would deliberately do it because it was apparently this amazing sensation.
He literally said it was, this is a quote, like one of the 3 best feelings I'd ever had in my life. We're like, what?
Well, when you the cars were so darn hot that like at Barber, which was hot, right?
Yeah.
I would go in before I got in the car and get 2 IV bags.
Yeah.
So 2
Wow.
IV in me,
Yeah.
and I started the race there once. So I had 2 IVs before I started the race, and then before it went green, before we actually rolled off pit lane, I drank the entire
Oh, no way.
bottle.
Holy crap.
So yeah, that time that I had to go, that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
good stuff.
any,
Jill's question?
Yeah, so question for
Campbell.
Jill Campbell. Have you ever had to pee in a race car, Jill?
Right. Have you ever been in a race car, Jill? She probably hasn't. Maybe that's well. They have a lot of street cars down there, but
Yeah,
what
maybe
question
just
did I ask her?
bored.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Felt like it.
Just I'm gonna pee in this car now.
Yeah,
Does
it's
she,
mine now.
Does she still see tire tracks from my dual-purpose motorcycle when I lived down there and used to ride the hills before I came into work? Maybe that's my question.
That's a
Okay.
fair
Does she still
question.
see my
That's
tire
fine.
tracks? Ask her which ones though.
Would she know?
Does she? Yeah. Ask her. Has she ever seen my tire tracks? That's my question to her.
It's almost like bragging. Like, you ever
Yeah.
see my tire tracks?
Let's see what she says.
What's up?
Let's see what she says.
What's up, Jill?
See what she says. She'll get either really mad. She'll say that guy, I hate that guy, or something.
So I hear you're the something of Laguna Seca.
Yeah.
So I hear we didn't do our research, and you do something in California.
Yeah. Ask her. Say, I want to know when you last saw my tire tracks.
Yeah.
How about that?
could
Something
do
like
that.
that.
So you lived out there?
At Laguna? Oh yeah, I lived in Carmel. I lived in
Oh, nice.
rented a room in a retired lady's house, and it was
Yes.
literally paid $200 a month for this room. And it was
Nice.
fully furnished and great, but
But
was
it
in
wasn't in like
Carmel.
an old person's community. It was just a little retired lady's home.
no, I was broke going down there more or less, and I was trying to conserve money as much as possible. And I went down because I was getting credits for the school. Actually, I got a grant to go down there partly from the Marin Educational Foundation. Another story, but anyway, so I was at the school down there, college down there, and there was a tag on the wall that said "room for rent for $200," and I was like, "No way, $200!"
Yeah.
So boom,
Right.
that was it.
Did you know that Spencer Pompelli killed somebody?
What?
So, one thing that I always relate back to you is that when you had your crash at Daytona a couple years ago, Sean and I were hosting a webcast for Magnus Racing's website, where basically all the fans can come and just see a bunch of stupid shenanigans and terrible, again, fart jokes.
Yeah.
And when your accident took place, we suddenly found ourselves having to report on it, and we're not professional reporters by any means.
Nope.
But we have a chat room with 50,000 people coming and going, and it suddenly turned into what are you guys hearing?
Yeah, and we're not going to answer. We don't
Yeah,
know
and it
what's
was one
going
of those situations where we had to turn into professional broadcasters and deflect
Wow.
questions and everything. And Sean is obviously known you for a while, and I just know who you are. And it was just one of the situations where we're both emotionally attached to the situation, but also really have no business being in front of
actually commenting on
a
this,
group of people that are now badgering us for questions, because of course the TV wasn't going to say anything. So it turned into
Right.
let's ask those guys. They're in the pit lane.
Yeah.
Right.
It's literally one question after the next, and we're again, can't speculate. Just gonna
go on with it.
gonna sit here.
And it was
I mean,
a-
it was this really weird thing that happened.
Yeah.
And when we interviewed Bob Varsha earlier in our series of podcasts, and we asked him, we're hey, what's what do you do? And he goes, I practice. I literally plan for things to happen in that situation, because that's my job, is to be the guy that handles that situation with poise and handles it properly. But
Wow.
that's one of the things that I'll always think back
Yeah.
to you about. And we were actually kind of not giddy, but we're wow, this is kind of unique for us, because we're doing this podcast together, and on a former thing we did together is when you had
Yeah.
your situation. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You and I actually had a really cool battle at Daytona a couple years ago. You were in the Nonamaker GTR
yeah.
X8, and you were the
Yep.
only I think Wayne's the fast one, the Wayne Nonamaker.
The fastest of all the guys, or the other guys?
Yeah, I think he's the quick one, right? Is there Wayne or Will?
It was Wayne.
Okay, so you had
Yeah.
Wayne Nonamaker as your other
Right.
quick guy, and I had
Right.
Kenny Wallace, the NASCAR driver, as my other quick
Yeah.
guy. And so basically it turned into every time I get in the car, they're Memo's getting in. I'm oh, God. All right.
Wait, which car were you in?
I was in one of the TRG Porsches, and you finished 7th and we finished 8th, and it was one of these things. And for until the last hour, we were like yo-yoing with your car on strategy, and it literally turned into like me versus you. You have no idea who the other guy is. It was like some idiot in the 4 cars right with you, and you're like whatever. And I'm like Memo Gidley, and it was just really funny because like I guess
I knew somebody was bump drafting me. Who was that? Was that you?
Right. So I remember Catherine Crawford was like running your car, and
she's awesome.
and you guys are having a good run there.
Yeah,
that's a top 7 or whatever. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it turned into literally like I get out of the car and they're like, okay, they're putting Joe in the car, and I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm gonna get like some sleep. Right. And it literally would be like, be back in 4 hours, and then like 30 minutes later, like they're putting Memo back in. Wake up! I'm like, no, come on. But I just looked up the results because I'm like, I can't remember who finished where, but with like an hour to go, the right rear tire in our car wouldn't come off.
Oh,
with like 2 hours ago. So like, just keep
I
going.
forgot about that.
And I'm like,
I
I can hear everything that's happening around the oval. It's just like getting worse and worse.
No,
and like, you got this. I'm like, I don't got this.
Yeah, this is not safe.
Yeah. But
did
Sean
you
would have
keep
been
going,
there.
or did you come in?
Yeah, no, we just finished on the like 3-hour-old right rear.
That's not.
But I bet they
good.
charge for 4 sets of tires.
That's not good. Yeah.
That was a fresh slick.
Yeah, it was fresh, man. Fresh, bud.
But yeah, those are my 2 Memo Gidley stories. Now, and I know now that you were traded for a passport for a bag of lemons.
Yeah,
right.
Basically, yeah.
I think if there's one thing to walk away from this podcast,
That's the best.
It's that you are an illegal alien.
Listen, guys, I got a bag of lemons. I gotta hang on to it.
This.
Can't let go of it.
It is a unique story, that's for sure.
When do you think? What's your goal? You coming back to sports car racing? Is that kind of where you want to see yourself?
I would love to.
You always seem to get high-profile rides in the big races, whether it's with like the Wayne Taylor Racing Team, which is a championship-winning team, or Bob Stallings, who is one of the not only fan favorites but also always in the hunt for those big races. Clearly, they're not currently in that series, but you have a very strong reputation as being a great guy for the long races. Is that something you see yourself doing in the next couple of years once you're back on the horse?
Yeah, I mean, long or short races, just the long races, they start looking for more drivers.
Exactly.
So it just opens up the opportunities for employment.
Right.
So all those guys, including Gainesco or Wayne Taylor Racing or any of the teams, they would, we'd work together full time. That'd be great.
Right.
So, but yeah, I definitely see that happening. I mean, I was in, I drove a sort of a sister brother car to the one that I won the 25-hour race with Award Motorsports, 997 Cup car at Thunder Hill the other day.
Yeah.
I did, I drove a few laps the first day, and then I broke in some brake pads because nobody was around. I jumped in before anybody could get in the second day.
Right, nice.
So they're like, "What?" I'm like gone out there. Yeah. So sorry, you guys weren't around. I had to make the decision. I'm
taking one for the team here, guys.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I did this for you. So, but I loved it. I mean, I love being out there doing it. And even when I'm at the go-kart track and I'm seeing people out there drive, it's like, oh man, I want to be out there so bad.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Number one priority is to get strong, to basically physically get healed. And, but yeah, I mean, it's getting back out there and doing it is something I enjoy. Car racing, can it be like a full-time deal? Well, maybe, but it's still a little bit up and down.
Right.
But, that's why I have those other projects and other businesses that I do, other side stuff that I do also,
Right.
So
what are some of the day-to-day jobs right now?
Well, the other thing is I have a commercial captain's license, not for flying planes, but for driving boats.
Nice.
So I have a 100-ton license, which is actually a 200,000 pound vessel, which is pretty big.
Okay.
And so I do some private, operating people's vessels.
That's a lot of lemons.
And also do some side work, like work on the Acania, which was a 136-foot steel boat that was owned by Al Capone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
he used to live right in the middle of this bay.
right.
For a few years.
That was right after he owned the boat.
Yeah.
Don't know what that coincidence is.
Weird.
So
cool.
do that, and then actually have a not Finding Nemo, but Sailing Memo boat charters.
Yeah.
So I have a boat charter
bit.
business that I do and do a lot of coaching. And so all that sort of stuff just sort of fill in.
Yeah.
But yeah, number one thing is if I could get back into a race car and not if I could, but if I could get hired by somebody and do it full time, then that's what I would do. That's what I enjoy, I'd say, the most, on a full time basis. So it's it can happen for sure. I mean, my hero right now is a guy like Scott Pruitt.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's awesome. Guys like Scott Dixon and whoever
Yeah.
else gets in the car, and he runs the same or faster lap times.
And he's like 85 years old.
I think he's like 86.
He's
Yeah,
just got
exactly.
Social Security got going
Right.
on him. Yeah.
So it's not like you can't do it. And like I've always said, with anything, it's your desire to do
How
it.
bad do you want it?
How bad do you want to do
Yeah.
it? And so I can do it for sure, without a doubt. Time frame wise, it's 6 months after the surgery, so it'll probably be a year before I'm able to get back in and drive, something like that, because it'll be another 4 or 5 months before the surgery, probably. So, that seems like a long time, but I'm still way younger than Scott Pruitt. So.
Right. For sure.
Coming for you, Pruitt.
Yeah.
You're my guy.
He's my hero. But, yeah, I want to get back out there for sure.
So when the time comes that you're ready to put yourself out there for teams, will you let us make a promotional video, but we won't let you preview it?
Well, it depends. Like, where are you going to do it? Like, in the bathtub?
We're not sure. We'll figure it out. We got to plot it out. We got a storyboard. We're going to make it. I'm just saying. I'm imagining.
Do I have to sign this release or what?
Do you wear a hat when you're driving the boat? Like I want.
Yeah.
Did you have like a pirate's hat or like a captain's hat?
Yeah. What's the
Gilligan?
Gilligan
Yes,
Island.
yes.
Right? I have one of those
Yes.
hats.
That's
Absolutely.
what I
You gotta
wanted.
do that.
I wanted that so bad.
And you got to have the stripes on the
Yeah, of course.
stripes on the sleeves. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent.
We have a business.
Yeah, exactly right.
We've got another client.
We're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking the time with us. We can't wait to see you get back in a race car, but we appreciate you letting us come into your home.
Yeah.
Which is so weird that people are letting us come into their homes.
Yeah.
Like we've been into Bo
Jeff
Barfield's
Brown's,
house and,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Jeff Brown's house, and both of them were super accommodating.
And you ordered the food for us. We didn't
Yeah,
have to
like
do
none of
that,
them
which is
ordered.
crazy.
Well, yeah, we had to order food for Bo.
Yeah.
And then Jeff and his wife cooked for us, which is amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
like, oh, you don't have to do that. Like, we'll bring something.
My fiance was all worried because she said, "This place is a mess when you come in here." I'm like, "Huh? It's a mess?"
Brian just spent 5 days at my house.
Yeah, no, this
And
is
so
like
this
the
is
Taj
a
Mahal.
treat.
It's like spotless. I
Great.
could eat off the floor
After
here.
we get off of this, tell her that also, and I didn't tell you to say that.
Right.
So
I'm just gonna like out loud, like I've come up with it on my own. Like, man, this place is clean.
Yeah.
She's like, I heard that.
No, it's great seeing you guys. I appreciate you coming up here. Any way to get out there and get not my message, but just my experiences out there. It's motivational for me. It gets my juices flowing a little bit more, which just fires me up even more. So really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
I'd say Continental's got the check, but really Memo does.
Got the check?
No, we paid.
You got
Yeah,
a
we did
check?
pay for it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
paid.
Oh, you got a check? You guys are
Oh,
great.
God,
Did I
no.
say how great you guys
And
are?
here's a paycheck.
Don't tell everybody else that you're going to go interview that you paid me, like $250,000 or
Yeah, I think
something
it
like
was.
that?
Yeah, it was $250,000.
Yeah,
$250,000.
yeah. No, but it's
we read your contract.
yeah,
It's standard
it's-
for you. So
it's part
okay.
of NASCAR's insurance. It's
Yeah.
fine.
So, yeah. Thanks to Jim France for
Yeah,
the meal.
thank
Thank
you.
you. Yes.
for this rehab fee.
That's good. I like it.
Awesome. Well, in this case, Continental's got the check.
Nice. I like it. And there's leftovers. I can eat these tomorrow, too.
I'm finished.
Hands down, one of my favorite conversations. The great Memo Gidley. Unbelievable attitude, unbelievable storyteller, and a great mindset despite everything he's gone through. So how can you not love that guy? So carrying us out, we will return to a band called Slightly Stupid. They have a great song available on iTunes called One Bright Day. Figured to be a good tribute here, so let's hear it.
Things that you've been through so much.